let's get this meeting started. Thank you, everyone, and welcome to anyone viewing, and of course the committee, staff, and delegates to the Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee for February the 13th. I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting: interrupting councillor, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillor, staff, or others, hate speech, or defamatory comments. One last reminder for the delegations: please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. As this is a public hearing matter under the Planning Act, this is a formal public meeting to consider applications under the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral or written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the proposal applications are considered, the person or public body may not be entitled to appeal a decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal and may not be added as a party to a hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal. And we will proceed. Yes, it doesn't. Yes, I should have asked first. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? And Mr. Mayor, you've asked to speak.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Singh. I'd like to declare a pecuniary conflict of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act pertaining to item 5.1, the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications for Fergus Ave, 142 to 146 Fergus Avenue, as my property is in the circulation zone for the said application.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And then moving on to the item, again, as the official plan amendment application, OPA 22/02/FBB, zoning bylaw amendment application for 142-146 Fergus Avenue. And we have first a 5-minute delegations from our staff. Mr. Bateman, when you're ready, please proceed. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Good evening, Chair Singh, committee members, staff, and members of the public. My name is Brian Bateman, and I am very pleased to bring a staff report for committee's consideration recommending approval of an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, to facilitate the development of a 7-story mid-rise rental building with 78 units and 87 parking spaces located at 142 to 146 Fergus Avenue. The next slide is an aerial photo of the subject properties that are outlined in red, as you can see. And I really wish to draw your attention to sort of 3 key aspects of this slide. I think firstly is the parcel fabric, and you can see the subject property is deep and relatively wide, as are many of the properties located on the north side of Fergus Avenue, and these are ideal for redevelopment. Second is context. Context is always important in our applications, and you will notice that immediately adjacent to this property, as you look at this slide to the left, is a multi-development, a comprehensive multi-family development. It's called Hush Developments. It was recently developed a couple years ago. And on the right side of the subject properties is Fergus Place, a retirement community. South of these lands are single attached homes, and to the north and backing onto these lands at the back, the rear yard, is Woodland Cemetery. And then you'll also notice that the subject properties are very close to the Weber Fergus Avenue commercial area. That's a very important commercial area for these lands, as people can walk to it. It's also a major bus route as well. And then lastly, I think that's 4 actually, and I apologize, you will notice there's a green area as part of the Hush development. It's immediately next door to the left, right adjacent to Fergus Avenue. That is Fergus Green. That was a parks place that was developed as part of the Hush development. And as you can see from the next slide, I'll show you the conceptual site plan, and I apologize, I know it doesn't show up very clearly. I'm sure my counterpart, Kristen Baresdale, will provide a better picture for the development, but you'll notice there is park space at the very front of this development opposite Fergus Avenue, and a very generous setback to the building, which is 38 meters from Fergus Avenue. So the conceptual plan, as you can see from this slide, it's for 7 stories, it's for 78 rental units, there's 87 parking spaces, and it's in both surface, you can see visitor surface parking at the front, and there is underground and structured parking in the building itself. And the front yard setback, as I mentioned, is 38 meters from the street, so plenty of separation from the single detached homes to the south. And there's parkland in the front yard. This next slide is the proposed renderings, building renderings, showing the left and frontal views. As you can see, very interesting design. It's really, this slide is really to simply illustrate the building setbacks and step backs and building undulations. You can see there's quite a bit of undulation and step backs to these buildings to really promote compatibility and soften the massing of this development. As with any development, to facilitate it, in this case here, an official plan amendment is required, and it's from low-rise residential to medium-rise residential with a special policy area 56, and really it's to recognize the floor space ratio of this development at 2.3, so it's a medium-rise consideration. Next slide. To implement the OPA, a zoning bylaw amendment is also required, and it's from Res 4 in our new bylaw 2019-051 to Res 6 with site specifics, and it's really to implement that conceptual plan that I showed you. Setbacks, the front yard setbacks, there's special rear yard and side yard setbacks, the overall height and massing of the development. In addition to that, the zoning bylaw amendment also is required to rezone it from Res 4 to OSR-1. That's for the parkland, for the front. And also, lastly, adding a holding provision for the completion and approval of a stationary noise study that has been requested by the regional municipality of Waterloo. And that holding provision will be lifted at a later date. So opportunity, well, I think this presents 3 really positive opportunities for the city. It's a creation of a 7-story mid-rise building. We talk about the missing middle. Here's a classic example of where we've got one. It's providing 78 rental units, so this will add to our inventory. It will contribute to the diversity of housing within the Stanley Park neighborhood. And we get park space. It's not often in these developments, we often take cash in lieu, but in this case here, we worked very hard and diligently with the developer. We saw an opportunity with Fergus Green being where it's located to add to that through this development. And really the concept reflects that. So highlights and conclusions. So recommending approval of the applications really to permit the use of a 7-story multiple dwelling, to permit the maximum floor space ratio of 2.3, establish a parking rate of 1.14 spaces per unit, and permit side and rear yard reductions, again, to facilitate the development, as I showed you earlier. In my opinion, the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments demonstrates good planning principles and is consistent with provincial, regional, and city policies. Thank you, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions later on.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bateman. And now we'll proceed to the delegation. Ms. Baresdale, when you're ready. And as you know, you have 5 minutes to make your delegations.
Good evening, Chair Singh and members of committee. My name is Kristen Baresdale from GSP Group. We are the agents acting on behalf of the property owner for the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment you see tonight. Next slide, please. Just a quick overview of the site. I'm not really going to touch on it. Mr. Bateman did a great job. The site is ideally located within a community that has a number of existing commercial benefits, community benefits, institutional benefits. Mr. Bateman touched on the surrounding redevelopment opportunities that have happened close to the site. I've also noted on the south side of Weber Street, there's also Elevate condos, which is currently being built. And then in the broader community context, there's a number of institutional uses, park uses. Idlewood Recreational Center and swimming pool is within walking distance to the site. There's also a existing Grand River Transit services on Weber Street as well as Franklin, providing indirect access to the LRT at Fairview Park Mall. Next slide, please. As Mr. Bateman touched on, he showed this. This is the 2D conceptual concept or plan showing the building at the rear of the property. The green area that you see noted at the front is the parkland space that Mr. Bateman touched on. The intent is to provide 78 residential dwelling units that are combined 1 and 2 bedroom units. 89 parking spaces that are incorporated in surface parking that you can see off of Fergus Ave, 1 level of underground parking, and then 2 levels of podium parking. There is ground floor amenity space that is available to residents, as well as a terrace amenity space atop the 3rd-story podium. Next slide, please. This is a concept showing 1 level of the underground parking. The area in pink that you see at the front is the future fitness room or amenity room for the residents. The ground floor will contain the lobby, elevators up, etc. I did want to point out to you some of the zoning provisions that we're asking for is reduced side yards. On the top part of the screen, you'll see there's a slight bump out. That's where our pinch point is. There's stairs that are actually external to the building, providing access to the residents. So that was one of the reasons we requested the variance. And then you'll also see at the top part of the screen, there's a pinch point in the rear yard setback. We are asking for a reduction from 7.5. The dashed line that you see kind of transversing on an angle down towards the site, that is the regulatory 7-meter setback. So you can see we're essentially meeting it for the majority of the site. Again, that setback, reduced setback is just to reflect that pinch point. Next slide, please. These are just some of the floor plans. The top one is level 2, so again, you can see the parking spaces, and then there's residential units that would look out onto the Fergus Green, I think it's called retirement home or long-term care facility. Level 3, you see additional residential units. Those in the yellow or brown color are the 2-bedroom units, and then you'll see the pink amenity space, which is providing access to the amenity terrace for future residents. The units will range in size from approximately 525 square feet to up to 1,000 square feet. Each unit has its own private balcony or terrace. Next slide, please. So you can see the slight bump outs of the private balconies at the top screen. They're around the perimeter of the building. And then the level 6 through 7, you'll see kind of one elongated terrace. That is private terrace for each of the residential dwellings. Next slide, please. These are the building elevations. So this is the view from Fergus Ave. Off to the right-hand side, you can see the access to the underground parking garage. The renderings that Mr. Bateman had showed you showed that glass facade at the front. That is a stairwell. And then off to the left-hand side is the amenity space for residents. That would include lobbies, meeting rooms, fitness area, etc. Next slide. So the top elevation that you're seeing right now is the east elevation. It is what the view would be from if you were standing on the long-term care facility on the site. I pointed out to your attention the stairwell that was at the rear of the building. You can see that on the right hand of the page on an angle coming down. And then the bottom slide is what the west elevation would look like. So this is what the elevation would look like for those who are living in the Hush developments right now. And then finally, last slide. This would be the view from Woodland Cemetery. So we are providing a 5-meter setback along that property line. In addition, there is some setbacks or buffers provided as part of the cemetery as well, providing for a really quite adequate separation from privacy perspective for anybody using the cemetery or visiting the cemetery. Next slide. Mr. Bateman touched on, we are seeking to change the designation from low-rise residential to medium-rise residential, slightly increasing the FSR to 2.3. Next slide. And then we are proposing to change it from Res 4 to Res 6, as well as that recreational open space zone that Mr. Bateman spoke to reflect the park space at the front. A number of these variances or tweaks to the zoning bylaw are being requested because they reflect some of the unique constraints and development impacts on the site. We had extensive pre-submission consultation with the city. Our original concept had an 8 or 9-story building that came in, and working with city staff to, first of all, provide for that park space at the front, which had a significant impact on the developable space of the site, and then providing for a building that we felt transitioned well and was compatible with surrounding uses. Next slide. The parkland block that's being conveyed is approximately 7% of the total land area, so slightly more than what we are required to provide. The city had some standards in terms of size so that it could actually be a usable park. Some of the other key considerations were parking and traffic. The proposed development will be generating 27 a.m. peak and 35 p.m. trips on the site, and the reduced parking is ever so slightly below what the requirement would be by the zoning bylaw. Number 3, compatibility. The proposed development and building has been situated or placed at the back of the site, and some of the building step backs, et cetera, have been provided to provide for that transition. 4, the cemetery incorporates setbacks around the perimeter as well as some tree retention. We've also been asked by the city to provide for some tree retention between this property line and Hush development. And then number 5, this provides for further intensification along Weber Street. It's my opinion that we're starting to see some kind of evolution and intensification in this corridor. You've got Elevate condos, you've got Hush development, and then there's also an application further down on Weber Street. And then finally, these are intended to be, we're not quite sure what the ultimate tenancy will be, but they are multiple dwelling units, providing additional housing options and types for residents. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Yes, there are a few questions of you. Barisdale, Councillor Davey.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Barisdale. I really like this proposed development here. My only question is, I heard you mention, and I might have missed part of it, but you said there you started off with a bit of a higher building proposal. Being the current environment that we're in, would your applicant consider additional density on this site in exchange for the possibility of some affordable units?
Through you, Mr. Chair, some of the struggles we're also facing is be able to provide sufficient parking on the site. There's quite a grade change as you move back, so the building has been designed with that bigger base to be able to provide parking. Additional units would force us into probably likely a further parking reduction. While this is serviced by transit, it's not part of an LRT or major station area, so that would be something that we would have to review. One of the other significant comments that we received as part of the public meeting, as well as correspondence with staff, was trying to provide for a transition in building height. So you see 12 and 15 stories at Weber and Fergus, recognizing that we are surrounded by low density on either side. I think Hush has a maximum of 3 stories, and then you've got the 2-story long-term care facility. So we felt that this was the best option in terms of compatibility in the neighborhood.
Okay, so and again, personally, I can't speak for obviously committee, but I'm less concerned about the parking. Like, we could reduce the parking. So I guess the question would be, if like, I wouldn't direct it. To be frank, I'm going to approve this no matter what. But if your applicant was interested in that, going down that route, and we could work out the parking. And again, I haven't been able to ask our professional staff in these questions yet, but do you know offhand if that is something that your applicant would consider between now and council?
I can absolutely take that back to them. We came in with more units and higher density as part of our initial application, so I would suspect that it would be something that could at least be reviewed and discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. And under the Res 6 zoning as what's being requested, it does allow for 8 stories as opposed to 7 stories that's proposed, to your point. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. No questions at this time. I'll have some comments later, but I'll be prepared to move this when the time comes.
Thank you very much. I'll come to you when we come to comments and moving the motion. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Are there any, you didn't mention affordable units. So there's no thought of having some of these be affordable?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are no affordable units provided as part of this that meet the definition of affordability from the region's perspective. However, there are smaller sized units that convert to if you're looking for affordable ownership, they may fall within that range of affordable ownership.
But aren't these rentals?
We're not certain what the tenure will be at this point.
Okay, I thought I heard you say they were rentals. Also, the piece of land immediately to the west of the proposal, when I Google it, it shows that there's a house, a single-dwelling home right beside it, but that's all been taken over? There's no house immediately beside your proposed site?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's my understanding that we butt right up to, so this proposed property is 2 separate houses right now.
Right.
And then it butts up to Hush Development, townhouses on one side and the retirement home on the other side.
Yeah, I know, it's just that maybe the Google map isn't up to date, so I was just a bit concerned about the setbacks to, if it was in fact a single dwelling home. And what about any sustainability features? Like you're not going for net zero or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't really gotten into the detailed design at this point. We haven't even made a site plan application for the proposed development. This developer has a system where he gets the approvals in place, and then it's usually turned over to somebody else to do the development. I suspect, or I would think that the city would require a sustainability statement as part of a site plan application, where we would touch on those sustainability construction considerations. Unfortunately, we don't have that information at this time, though.
Okay, so I guess those are my 2 asks, that, if we could have some affordable housing units, that would be very, very good, and also some sustainability features, or more information on that. Thank you.
Councillor Denell. Thank you, Chair.
You talk about, or there mentioned about park space. So is a park space going to be, so it's in the front. So what kind of park space will it be?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it will be conveyed to the city, and it will be up to the city to determine how they're going to program that park, whether they're going to put play structures, landscaping,
Okay.
whatever has happened to that, but it will become municipal property.
Okay, yeah, that's, so how many homes, sorry, and I'm looking at the Google Maps as well. How many homes will be coming down as part of this development?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's 2 existing single detached houses there right now. One of them is currently used by the property owner as his office, and he is renting the other one out. It is not considered affordable rental. It's a market rent, I think, as of January 2022 rates.
Okay. I'll add my comment now, because I think the residents of the long-term care facility will love to, that'll be activity for them for a couple of years going up. So, yeah, it's a beautiful looking development. Trust me, it will be.
Thank you, Councillor Denell. Councillor O'Dooney.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just going through some of the comments from neighbors that live in that area, and a few ones of those comments came out that I would just love your thoughts, something to possibly consider. Number 1 was privacy, especially with a retirement home right around the area. Would love your thoughts around what can be done to ensure that their privacy is taken care of, as this 8-story is going to be, I don't know if I should use the word towering, but in the grand scheme in Kitchener, that is towering at a time like this. Would love your thoughts on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so the first floor doesn't have any residential units on it. So side to side, there's going to be nobody on that bottom floor looking out over residents. The second floor has units looking out over the retirement home. As part of the urban design brief that was submitted to the city in support of this, they asked for an angular planes analysis. So for us to give them a sense of what the overlook is, what the angle from the ground is, to confirm that we were actually not imposing on surrounding property owners with respect to those angles and where people's sight lines go when they're standing and when they're using their space. The balconies are quite small, and I'm sure that there will also be additional glazing and construction considerations as part of development to make sure that the windows perhaps have mirroring on them or some kind of shading on them. Not only do we want to protect the residents, the surrounding residents, but I'm sure that they will anticipate some privacy concerns as well as future tenants of the building.
Thank you. I think this one is more directed to staff. One of the concerns here, is more focused on traffic. And there's a comment here around, it takes a while to turn left onto Franklin. I'm just throwing that out. Is that something that we've just, when we do our traffic visibility, like at peak periods, just doing drive around those areas to see how this could further affect traffic flow in that area, and maybe some recommendations and changes needed in that area as well?
Councillor Dooney, we'll come back to questions of staff after the delegation, so we'll give opportunity for all of us. So if you can just want to key in afterwards.
No worries, thank you,
Of
sir.
course. My mouse doesn't want to work. Oh, it is, yeah. Not lazy chair, lazy mouse. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have a comment. So do you want me to wait?
Of course, yeah. Still more questions.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so that seems to be all the questions for you. Ms. Bearsdale, thank you so much and for your patience.
Thank
So
you.
if you want to key in for questions of staff, thank you. And Councillor Davey had keyed in beforehand, so I'll go to him first. Not that I'm playing favorites. No, he had keyed in even before you. Unless he wants to give you your spot.
I was actually just going to follow up on the question asked Ms. Barrisdale, if I could, on, again, given the current climate and the housing goals we're trying to achieve, does staff have any preliminary concerns if, in terms of working with the the applicant between now and council, see if there is a further opportunity for perhaps some increased density in exchange for some affordable units? And again, I'm assuming this would have to come at the cost of lowering the parking per unit, but the reality is people that tend to rent affordable units don't have vehicles anyway and rely on public transit, so that's less of a concern to me.
From staff's perspective, we wouldn't have a major difficulty with it, Councillor Davey. One of the things I think that we'd really have to look at is any additional impact from that increased height. I know from the residents in the area, they were concerned about the height of 7 stories. They may have concerns with that additional height as well. It may affect shadow because we're going that much higher. I think those are some of the things that we'd have to focus on.
Okay, so I don't want to send mixed messages to the applicant, so my intention would be I intend to approve. I'm not going to defer it. I intend to approve as moved by Councillor Schneider, but if I could ask the staff have those discussions with the applicant, and if something comes up between now and council, I don't think anything precludes us from revisiting at that time. Is that correct?
That's fine, Councillor.
Okay.
We can definitely do that.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, it's being moved by Councillor Schneider, but I'll take that as an amendment to staff that the committee is directing that they enter into discussion with the applicant for the proposition of perhaps additional height to the zoning of 8 stories, which the zoning does allow, and in lieu for affordable housing units as well. Okay, for clarity. Councillor O'Dooney.
Going back to my earlier question around traffic, would love your thoughts.
Through the chair, great question. A traffic impact study was done for the property, and what it found out was that impact to the road infrastructure, because that's really what a traffic impact study does on a site-by-site basis. It really looks at what's the traffic coming from the site onto the road network. It doesn't necessarily look at the road infrastructure further away at the corner of Fergus and Weber, which I think was one of your questions, making the left-hand turn movements. I'm familiar with that in that area. I recognize that it is a challenge at times, but certainly from a traffic point of view, there was nothing that came out of that traffic study that said there was any challenges with the road infrastructure or need for any turning lanes to be constructed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have just a couple clarity questions. Just trying to fall back on a little bit of memory, looking at an earlier application a while back where there was a change to a Res 5, so it was low rise, but stacked towns, I believe. At that point, staff had indicated that the current zoning from R6 perspective, where I think it's 1.25, in the updated bylaw, it's now going towards 1 per unit. Is that correct? Does that include for visitor parking as well, total one per unit.
So to the chair, actually, it is one space per unit, but we do add in a 0.15 percentage for visitor parking, so it turns out to be 1.15 spaces per unit.
Okay, and that would be the same for Res 6 as well then?
Correct, yes.
Okay. But again, staff are saying that there could be some flexibility if the proponent was amenable for having increased units in lieu of some affordable housing units, that reduction in the parking. And I'm assuming that there would be a requirement for increased FSR as well then, if we're going a story higher.
Correct, that is correct. The
And staff
FSR
wouldn't have any issue with the increased FSR either.
Providing, like I said to Councillor Davey, that some of the impact studies, like the shadow, still make sense, then we wouldn't have concerns with the FSR. And from a parking point of view, given the location of the property, I mean, close to Weber Street, it does qualify for transportation demand management options, so that could be further considered as well for a reduced parking rate.
Okay, all right. So that seems to be all the questions of staff. The motion is moved by Councillor Schneider. I'll take up for comments. And Councillor Johnston had said first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Singh. And through you, I just wanted to comment that this is really a lovely building, and it's a great example of a mid-rise building. I'm with Councillor Davey. I would love to see it if they would maybe be willing to go a little bit higher on this, but it's you know, we don't often see buildings of this height come to council. This is absolutely something that we need to be doing, and I was really excited to see it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Singh. I want to thank staff and the applicant for putting forth a building like this. As the ward councillor, I've seen this street transform with the sale of some of the property that Emmanuel Bible College owned, which is now the Hush Towns, which is a beautiful development. This will add to it. It really, as we talk about intensification and doing it responsibly and doing it well, Fergus Avenue is a great example of that. And if you drive down it, I think you'd be impressed with what you see. There are other great little benefits to this. Idlewood Park is going to be improved, which is very close, just down from this development. Kinsey Park, also part of a park network improvement, very close to this. Walkability to grocery stores and other amenities. When the Elevate development is finished, there'll be more amenities there. Transit, everything. This ticks off all the boxes. And as we look to increase our housing supply and do it responsibly and do it well, this is just great work by all. So thank you so much for all the hard work on this, and to everyone involved in putting this forward. I look forward to seeing the site plans and seeing it open.
Thank you. Next up is Councillor Owaduni.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. I'm all you to that. I'm just kidding. I just had a comment to share as we proceed. I like this. I'm in favor of it. I want to acknowledge all the messages that came in from the neighbors in this area and their concerns. And it always makes it hard to make these types of decisions because then you see both sides. But for me, I had to write this down because I think this is something I'm going to have to say to myself, and I think it's something that everyone watching or listening to this will have to think about as well. Kitchener is changing. Our city is fast growing. Are we ready? Are we mentally ready? And I think every single one of us, councillors and staff and also neighbors and people that live in our streets, Ward 5, all our different wards, are we ready to adapt to these changes? But I'm in support of this. Just wanted to throw it in there.
You just helped me along with my comments, Councillor Orduni. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Davey. It's always a good day when we see projects like this that are servicing rental purpose units. We're in dire need of rental product in our community, and it definitely helps serve a different demographic in our community. But what makes this even more a special project in my mind is the location, and as the ward councillor Schneider has mentioned, you know, it's right. It's in a perfect spot in the 15-minute walkable node, and you know, close to shopping, close to all the amenities and employment and everything else. So it's in a perfect neighborhood that's transitioning to higher density as well, and as the consultant has mentioned with Elevate and all that. So it's a great project.
Thank you, Councillor Ioannidis. Councillor Michaud?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to concur with Councillor Ioannidis and a lot of the other comments that were just made. It's refreshing to see this development here, and I agree with this area. I'm familiar with this area. A little bit of disclosure: I worked at a high school job at the retirement place there, so it's been there for a long time. And I do agree with Councillor Deneau that the residents will be happy to see this, some excitement going on. So yeah, nice job. I like the development.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud. I'll just quickly try to add some of my comments, and I think if ever tonight is an interesting moment, because coming up to this meeting, we had a very challenging day hearing from very concerned residents about urban sprawl, about, you know, impacts to wetland, loss of, you know, as we've heard other concerns in the past as well, loss of farmland and increased costs of infrastructure. So that's the point that we're in. I think, Councillor Owoduni, you have raised a good point that we have to ask ourselves, are we ready for this increased development or increased density? And I think, in my perspective, the answer is it's not that if we're ready, we have to be ready, because we can't play both sides. We can't be worried about urban sprawl, we can't be worried about environment, we can't be asking about sustainability, and at the same time, then really object or have major concerns when we know for a fact density will bring transit issues. It does causes, and at the same time, but we know over time, those concerns likely would be mitigated with different technologies. At the same time, we have to, you know, be cognizant and appreciative of the impacts of the existing neighborhoods, but again, if not here, then where? And the alternative is just as worse, if not much, much more so. So in that, in keeping, I think Councillor Davey, with his amendment, directions to staff to enter into discussion with the proponent with possibilities of increased density to, I guess, the maximum of what R6 allows, and of course, encouragement of affordable housing units in that consideration as well, gives us a wider breadth of more options to already good design and good development. And maybe with everything I said, Councillor Clancy has a comment as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Councillor Chapman's request to look into sustainability features. Like, we just had this difficult conversation about this wetland, but we need to build sustainably. Is there anything we could do to not rely on fossil fuel for the heating and cooling, or to use materials that are low carbon? So I think that was already said, but I just wanted to reiterate my hope for that.
Thank you, Councillor Clancy, and I think it's a good point. With that, the item has been moved and the comments made. All those in favor? Opposed? And that item carries. We'll move on to the next item, which is for the holding provision. Official plan amendment application. Zoning bylaw amendment, block 22, 25, 28, and part of block 22, 29, plan 58M-643 for Trussell West subdivision. For that, we have a delegation first from our staff. Mr. Dumart, of course, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and good evening, members of committee. Before you is a zoning bylaw amendment for the subject lands located at blocks 22, 25, 28, and part of blocks 20, 21, 23, 24, 26, 27, and 29 of Registered Plan of Subdivision 58M 643, more commonly known as the Tressler West subdivision. Staff are recommending approval of the zoning bylaw amendment to allow for street townhouse dwelling units with increased garage facade widths of 78% for corner lot units and reduced external end unit lot widths of 7 meters. The subject lands are currently vacant and located in the Tressler West subdivision. While this stage of the subdivision is not currently developed, the planned vision for the stage of the subdivision permits single-detached, semi-detached, street townhouse dwellings, multiple dwellings, and directly across from the subject properties are institutionally zoned lands, which allows for a future school site. The subject lands are currently zoned low-rise residential 4 zone with site-specific provisions 297, 301, and 302 in zoning bylaw 2019-051. And the current zoning permits single-detached and semi-detached dwellings with reduced lot width, reduced rear yard setbacks, increased building heights, and allows for porches and terraces to be located closer to the street. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes to change the zoning to low-rise residential 5 zone, which would allow for street townhouse dwellings, and it would carry forward the existing site-specific provisions 297, 301, and 303, and proposes to add a new site-specific provision 359 to allow street townhouse dwellings with increased garage facade widths of 78% and reduced external end unit lot widths of 7 meters. So before you is a conceptual rendering of what the proposed zoning will permit on the subject lands. 2-story modern townhouse dwellings with larger corner end units are proposed to be developed on the subject properties. Only the corner lot units will be permitted to have the 78% garage facade widths, which can then accommodate 2-car garages with 2 additional parking spaces. The corner lots are priority lots, which will include high-quality design and materials for the corner lot units with wraparound covered porches. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment, it presents an opportunity to permit street townhouse dwellings that align with the rest of the planned community. The zoning will permit a modern built form that is compatible for the neighborhood and allow for a variety of street townhouse units with enhanced urban design. In conclusion, staff are supportive of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment as it's compatible and appropriate for the neighborhood. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with policies of the provincial policy statement, conform to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, the City Kitchener official plan, and represents good planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dumar. Councilor Ordini, is it okay if you can come back to staff for questions? We have a delegation for the proponent as well. Okay, I'll have you first. All right, so for our only delegation would be Ritual. Ms. Wolf, welcome, and you have 5 minutes to make your delegation on behalf of the proponent.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Chair and Council, and thank you very much, Craig, for your presentation. My name is Rachel Wolf from MHPC Planning, and I'm here representing the applicant.
So can you bring the mic just a little bit closer to you, or maybe the mic?
Is that better?
Can be raised, so whatever makes it easier for us to hear. Yeah.
Is that better?
I think so, yes. Thank you.
I don't actually have a formal presentation. I think Craig summed up everything that is proposed here, and just here to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Okay, Councilor Ordini.
Just a very, very important question. Is this going to be located in Ward 5 or in Paul's ward?
Ward 5.
Ward 5? Brilliant. Thank you.
I don't know if it would have made a difference, but all right. We'll get into that after the meeting. Councilor Donnell.
Thank you, Chair Singh. How many units, excuse me, how many units are we talking about? What was that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, 42 units.
42? Okay. That's all. Thank you.
And that's all the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. All right, questions of staff? That was it? Okay. All right, I just have a quick clarity. I like the design, and one of the things that was emphasized as part of the design, the modern design, as it was referenced the wraparound porches, which I personally don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, and I like the fact that there's a balcony up top as well. But recalling our Rhines bylaw, which encourages, I think, unnecessarily to have a protruding porch, are we showing some flexibility now, or it's not required here?
Through the chair, the site-specific provisions that are being carried forward allow for encroachment of covered terraces and porches. So it would be notwithstanding the Rhines bylaws, they would be permitted to be within 2.5 meters of the street line.
Okay, all right, good, thank you. All right, that's all the questions of staff. I'll take a mover. Moved by, I'll just go to the ward councillor. I'll go to Councillor Owoduni. That's okay. And the item has been moved. Comments? There are no comments. All those in favor? Opposed? And that item carries as well. Thank you, everyone. And I'll take a mover to adjourn the meeting. Councillor Clancy, all those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you.